Here's something that's going to sound completely insane. A retired couple with $600,000 has a real, statistically backed chance of dying with over $2 million without ever working another day in their lives. No side hustle, no business, no lucky inheritance, just math. And before you write that off as, yeah, if the market does something magical, hold on. Because retirement planning models show something most financial advisors won't lead with. At average long-term returns of 7 to 8%, a balanced $600,000 portfolio can triple over 25 to 30 years, even while you're pulling income from it. So here's the uncomfortable question nobody's asking. If the math is this powerful, why do so many retirees end up scared, broke, or both? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how $600,000 can realistically become $2 million. And more importantly, you'll understand the one thing that quietly destroys it before it ever gets the chance. And trust me, it's not the stock market. Most people think retirement works like this. You stop working, you start withdrawing, your savings slowly drain until they don't. Sounds logical, right? Income stops, expenses continue. Math is math. If you retire at 65 with $600,000 and pull out $30,000 to $40,000 a year, how on earth could that portfolio ever grow? Here's what that thinking gets wrong. Your portfolio doesn't retire when you do. It's still invested. It's still compounding. It's still participating in every market rally, every dividend, every year of economic expansion. The money doesn't clock out just because you did. Now run the numbers. On a 65-year-old couple with $600,000 earning 7% annually, that's roughly $42,000 in growth in year one alone. Withdraw $30,000 and you're still $12,000 ahead. The portfolio actually grew. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what about crashes? What about the years where the market drops 25% and you're still withdrawing? Doesn't that ruin everything? That's exactly the right question, because that is where the real story lives. And that's where the difference between struggling retirees and accidental millionaires is quietly decided. But here's where it gets dangerous. Let's talk about the math most retirees never actually run. Financial modeling for a typical 65-year-old couple, $600,000, diversified stock and bond portfolio, shows something wild. There's roughly a 50% probability that portfolio exceeds $1.8 to $2 million over a 30-year retirement. Read that again. While withdrawing income, half the time, it grows past $2 million anyway. Here's why. At a 7% average annual return, $600,000 with zero withdrawals becomes $1.16 million in 10 years, $2.28 million in 20, $4.56 million in 30. Now, yes, you're withdrawing. But moderate structured withdrawals don't kill compounding. They slow it. And in many scenarios, the growth still wins. Here's the contrarian claim most people aren't ready to hear. Retirement isn't always a drawdown phase. For disciplined investors, it can be a second accumulation phase. Nobody says that out loud because fear sells better than math. Panic keeps people clicking. Confidence in compounding doesn't trend on financial Twitter. Now imagine two retirees, same starting point, $600,000 each. The market drops 20%. Retiree A panics, moves everything to cash, tells himself it's the responsible move. Retiree B stays invested, uncomfortable but disciplined. 5 years later, retiree A is struggling to keep up with inflation on 2% savings yields, watching his purchasing power quietly erode every single year. Retiree B? Portfolio just crossed 7 figures. Same starting point, completely different outcome. So what actually separates them? It's not intelligence, it's not luck, it's not even financial knowledge. It's something much harder to control. During a significant market correction, a retired couple watched their $750,000 portfolio fall to $600,000 in a matter of months. They panicked, moved everything to cash, told themselves they were being smart, protecting what was left. Here's what happened next. The market recovered within 2 years. Had they stayed invested, their portfolio would have climbed past $900,000. Instead, they locked in losses, missed the entire rebound, and spent the next decade playing catch-up. They'd never actually catch. Why do intelligent, reasonable people make this call? Loss aversion. Your brain, neurologically, feels losses roughly twice as painfully as it feels equivalent gains. A $50,000 drop hits harder than a $50,000 gain feels good. That's not weakness, that's human wiring. Now layer on top of that retirement, where the stakes feel existential. What if we run out of money? What if this crash is different? What if we can't recover at our age? Fear doesn't need to be rational to be devastating. It just needs to feel urgent. And here's the thing nobody says during those moments of panic. Imagine 5 years from now. Inflation has quietly run at 3 to 4% per year. Cash sitting in a savings account earned 2%. Markets averaged 7 to 8%. Every year you spent playing it safe, you lost real purchasing power. The thing you thought was protecting you was the actual threat. Here's the reframe. The biggest risk in retirement isn't volatility, it's abandoning growth out of fear of volatility. Staying in cash feels safe, but slowly losing 2 to 3% of buying power every year, compounded over a decade, that's a financial disaster in slow motion. It just doesn't come with a dramatic headline. So what do the retirees who actually build wealth do differently? It comes down to 3 things, and none of them require genius. First, they separate income from growth. Instead of pulling from the portfolio randomly, disciplined retirees structure withdrawals, typically around 3 to 4% annually. On $600,000, that's $18,000 to $24,000 per year from the portfolio. Combined with Social Security or other income, that covers real expenses without gutting the principal. Second, they keep meaningful equity exposure. Not 100% stocks, that's not the point, but enough growth assets to outpace inflation over time. A 70-30 or 60-40 portfolio with disciplined rebalancing has historically weathered volatility while still compounding meaningfully. Third, they plan for longevity like it's a certainty, not a risk. A 65-year-old couple today has a statistically strong chance of at least one spouse living into their early 90s. That's potentially 30 years of compounding, 30 years of reinvested dividends, 30 years of market participation. Run the realistic math. $600,000 invested, 4% withdrawal, $24,000 per year, 7% average return. In long-term modeling, this portfolio frequently doesn't just survive, it grows. And here's the unexpected part. For some retirees, the biggest wealth-building years happen after they stop working. Why? No lifestyle inflation, no new debt, no pressure to fund a growing career, Just disciplined compounding, year after year, untouched. The irony is sharp. The people who retire with a modest amount and leave it alone often outperform the people who spent decades grinding, spending, and trying to optimize. You don't need a seven-figure salary to retire wealthy. You need patience and emotional control. And in a world wired for panic, that combination is genuinely rare.
Let's land this. Most people assume retirement is a slow financial decline. Withdraw, shrink, survive. But the data tells a different story. With disciplined investing, moderate structured withdrawals, and the emotional stability to stay the course, $600,000 has a realistic path to $2 million over a long retirement. Not magic, not luck, math combined with behavior. The gap between retirees who struggle and the ones who become accidental millionaires almost never comes down to how much they started with. It comes down to whether they stayed invested when fear was at its loudest. That's it. That's the whole game. So the real question isn't, can $600,000 turn into $2 million? The math says it can. The question is, will you get out of your own way long enough to let it? In the next video, we're going into the single biggest withdrawal mistake retirees make in their first 5 years, the one that silently destroys six-figure portfolios before compounding ever gets the chance to work. Because what you do in those first 5 years, it changes everything.